The ground did not shake because of earthquakes. It shook because armies marched across it. Millions of boots, hooves, and wheels crushing fields, cities, and human lives beneath them. Entire kingdoms vanished not through slow decline, but through sudden, overwhelming violence. Streets became slaughterhouses. Rivers ran dark with blood, and when the dust settled, nothing remained but ruins and mass graves. This is the story of the most ruthless conquerors in history. Men who did not just win wars, but turned entire civilizations into graveyards. Conquest has always been part of human history, but some rulers redefined what brutality meant. They did not seek compromise. They did not spare the defeated. Their goal was not merely victory, but terror. They wanted their enemies to surrender before battle even began, simply by hearing their names. Fear became their greatest weapon, and mercy was something they believed weakened empires. These conquerors understood one brutal truth: if resistance meant total annihilation, most would never dare to resist at all. One of the earliest and most terrifying examples was Ashurbanipal of Assyria. His empire thrived not because of diplomacy, but because of calculated horror. When Assyrian armies conquered a city, survival was never guaranteed. Ashurbanipal boasted about flaying his enemies alive, stacking heads into towering piles, and decorating city walls with impaled bodies. These acts were not hidden, they were advertised. Messages carved into stone proudly described massacres in graphic detail. The goal was psychological warfare. Kingdoms that heard of Assyria's approach often surrendered without a fight. Knowing resistance meant extinction. Entire regions became silent wastelands, not because Assyria ruled them kindly, but because it ruled them through terror. Centuries later, a storm rose from the Eurasian steppes, led by a man whose name alone still sends chills through history: Genghis Khan. He did not build his empire city by city, but corpse by corpse. When Mongol armies arrived, surrender meant survival. Resistance meant absolute destruction. Cities that refused to open their gates were wiped out entirely. Men, women, children, and animals slaughtered without exception. Chroniclers described skull pyramids rising outside ruined cities, monuments made not of stone, but of human remains. Some regions lost so many people that forests regrew over abandoned farmland, and wildlife reclaimed once thriving cities. Genghis Khan's conquests killed millions, possibly tens of millions, reshaping the population and geography of Eurasia forever. The Mongol terror did not end with Genghis. His descendants continued the tradition. Hulagu Khan, his grandson, led one of history's most devastating campaigns into the Middle East. In 1258, his armies reached Baghdad, then the intellectual and cultural heart of the Islamic world. The city surrendered, but mercy never came. Over the course of days, Mongol forces massacred hundreds of thousands. Libraries were burned. Scholars were slaughtered. Books were thrown into the Tigris River until the water reportedly turned black with ink and red with blood. Baghdad never recovered. A civilization that had led the world in science, medicine, and philosophy was reduced to ruins, marking the end of the Islamic Golden Age. In the ancient world, Alexander the Great is often remembered as a heroic genius, but his conquests left a trail of devastation few discuss openly. When cities resisted him, Alexander responded with overwhelming brutality. In the city of Tyre, after a long siege, his army slaughtered thousands and sold tens of thousands more into slavery. In Gaza, defenders were executed en masse. Entire populations were displaced or wiped out to make examples of resistance. Alexander's empire expanded rapidly, but behind the legend of glory lay cities emptied of life and regions traumatized for generations. Rome, too, built its empire on blood, and few exemplify its ruthlessness better than Julius Caesar. During his conquest of Gaul, Caesar waged what modern historians would likely classify as genocide. Entire tribes were exterminated, villages were burned, men were slaughtered, and survivors were enslaved by the hundreds of thousands. Caesar himself proudly recorded these events in his writings, presenting mass killing as strategic necessity. By the time Rome secured Gaul, vast areas had been depopulated, their cultures erased, their lands absorbed into the empire through violence so complete that resistance became impossible. In Asia, Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, earned a reputation that rivaled even the Mongols. He claimed to be restoring Genghis Khan's legacy, but his campaigns were marked by extreme cruelty, even by medieval standards. Timur's armies annihilated cities across Persia, Central Asia, and India. After each conquest, he ordered the construction of massive towers made entirely of human skulls. These were not symbolic, they were warnings. In Delhi, his forces slaughtered tens of thousands in a single day, turning one of the world's richest cities into a charred ruin. Timur believed terror ensured obedience, and he ruled through fear so absolute that entire regions collapsed at his approach. In the New World, the arrival of Spanish conquistadors brought a different kind of apocalypse. Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro did not command vast armies, but what they unleashed destroyed civilizations. Through a combination of violence, betrayal, and disease, they dismantled the Aztec and Inca empires with horrifying speed. Cities like Tenochtitlan were besieged, starved, and massacred until bodies filled the streets. Temples were destroyed. Rulers were executed. Entire cultures were crushed under foreign rule. While disease did much of the killing, conquest was enforced through terror, enslavement, and systematic destruction, turning thriving empires into mass graves within a single generation. In China, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, unified the country through relentless warfare. His armies crushed rival states, killing hundreds of thousands in prolonged campaigns. After unification, he did not stop. Scholars who opposed him were buried alive. Dissenters were executed. Books were burned to erase rival philosophies. Entire families were punished for individual crimes. His reign forged China into a single empire, but at the cost of unimaginable human suffering. The land was unified, but soaked in blood. Even in medieval Europe, where warfare was constant, some conquerors stood apart in their brutality. William the Conqueror, after facing rebellion in northern England, unleashed the harrying of the North. Villages were destroyed, crops burned, livestock slaughtered. Tens of thousands starved to death as entire regions were intentionally depopulated. The goal was not control, it was punishment. The North became a wasteland, a warning carved into the land itself. What connects all these conquerors is not just violence, but intention. These men understood that fear could travel faster than armies. By making examples of cities, by wiping out entire populations, they created reputations so terrifying that future resistance collapsed before it began. Kingdoms surrendered not because they were defeated, but because they knew what awaited them if they fought. Yet history also reveals a cruel irony. Many of these empires, built on mass death, collapsed quickly. The terror that held them together also ensured their instability. Fear breeds rebellion. Hatred outlives rulers. Graveyards do not produce loyalty. After the conqueror died, the empire often fractured, leaving behind ruins, resentment, and generations of trauma. Today, we admire monuments, maps, and legends of conquest, but rarely pause to imagine the silence left behind. Fields where laughter once echoed became burial grounds. Cities that once thrived were erased so completely that archaeologists still struggle to find their remains. These conquerors did not just defeat enemies, they ended worlds. Their victories reshaped borders and history, but their true legacy lies beneath the soil, in unmarked graves stretching across continents. Kingdoms turned into graveyards, civilizations reduced to echoes, and a reminder written in blood across history itself. Conquest may build empires, but it always leaves the dead behind.